all my life, I've wondered how jazz musicians pick the right chord for the right moment. I've wondered, how do they think about harmony? How can I think about harmony better? I also wonder, why are these chords where they are in some of these songs? So in this video, I'm going to give you the framework to take your understanding of harmony to the next level. My name is Lance, and on this channel I post my original music, my guitar playing, and teaching videos. If you find any of this to be helpful, don't be shy to like, comment, and subscribe. So in this video, we're going to focus on two kinds of things. We're going to focus on the vehicle, and then we're going to focus on the resolution. And the vehicle is how you get somewhere. So in the instance of a 2-5-1, D minor 7, G7, C major 7, D minor 7, and G7 are going to be the vehicle. And we're going to focus on the resolution, which is the second half, which is the phrase end or where you were going. In this video, I'm not always going to be using the word resolution in the way that the phrase is completely over. Sometimes I'm going to be using the word to illustrate that this is the second part of the phrase where the vehicle has taken us to. For example, if you're playing D minor 7, G7, C diminished 7, C major 7, the C diminished 7 is part of the resolution because it's the second half of the phrase. Make sense? The other thing with the vehicles is that you're always going to feel like this isn't over. It still has to go somewhere. And I guess you can also feel like that with the resolution part, like the C diminished example. But I think that the key difference here is that it's going to C diminished and it stays on C. Now, before I get into the fun and more emotional part of this process, I do need to talk about why some moving chords sound good. And this is all about the vehicle part of the chord progression. To do this, I'm just going to talk about the nuts and bolts of the chord. Some people call them the guts, the third and the seventh. So in the same example that I just took, the D minor 7, G7, C major 7, the guts move down in order to get the movement of the chord. So here we have D, F, A, and C to G, B, D, and F to C, E, G, and B. Now, the F and the C in the D minor chord go down to the F and the B, which is the seventh and the third of the G7 chord. And then the seventh goes down a half step more, and it's E to B, which is the guts of the C major 7 chord. The importance of those guts is really their function, which is why you can have so many options of chords and not just what's written on the page. In essence, if the function is the same, then we can change the notes of the chord and tweak the movement as a way to get new harmonic colors. So example, you could play A flat 7 sharp 11 to G7 because the A flat 7 sharp 11 is the same as a D7. And the D7 functions the same as D minor 7 here. It's just a different quality. And then another example would be D minor 7 to D flat 7 sharp 11 to C major 7. And that's because the D flat 7 sharp 11 shares the guts with G7. It's the tritone substitution. So you can use it as a substitute. And then the next thing you need to know is why you choose a chord. Chords are chosen because they're going somewhere or you're landing somewhere. This part is the more emotional part of the process. How does a chord feel and why? I'm going to give you a few categories of reasoning, but feel free to come up with your own. Number one is density. You want this moment to feel heavier than others. This is an important moment that the listener should take note of. That kind of moment could be a resolution kind of density. Or this is a transitional moment. This moment should feel lighter than others because it's not as important. It's leading to a more important moment. But how light should it feel? Should it glide by? Or should it feel like a slightly uncomfortable transition? For density, you should focus on the note count, spacing, and register. The next category is color. Certain chords have certain flavors. Sometimes it's incredibly overwhelming to have an extension, the 7, 9, 11, or 13, in a part of the song that requires just a triad. Other times, you're going to want some crunch, seconds, minor seconds, stuff like that. Those are really good determinants of the flavor of a chord. Number 3 is direction. Do you want to keep the pattern? What is the pattern? Is it a chromatic bass? Is the bass ascending in thirds, minor or major? Is it descending in thirds, minor, or major? This pattern, it could be really related to the guts of the chord, or it could be related to bass motion. A tune I think about is Cyclic Episode for this. Another way to judge them is by emotion or the narrative purpose of the chord. This chord is here because it enhances the story in some way. It drives you to feel a certain way, or it really accentuates the emotional climax. And lastly is timbre. This chord sounds a certain way on this instrument. Other chords can't replace it. It's just the way this instrument is. Good example is open E on the guitar. So here's the example section of this video. One time I was very lucky and I got to hang out with this wonderful jazz pianist named Bill Charlap. Bill is one of the best jazz pianists alive, and he told me this story about recording with Tony Bennett. In that recording session, Tony questioned why they were playing the tune They Can't Take That Away From Me by George Gershwin in the key of G flat. Apparently Bill said jokingly, "You'll see." And the reason why is that in that last phrase, "oh, they can't take that away," on the word "oh," they get to use the lowest note of the bass, the E, and so it really adds to the emotional climax of that song because you've been waiting for that moment like that. This follows the timbre principle because, again, the low E doesn't sound like anything else on that instrument. It also serves an emotional and narrative purpose because it's just that important moment of the song. Another one of my favorite examples I can think of is Ask Me Now by Thelonious Monk on the record Solo Flight. This is a great track and also one of my favorite tunes, but towards the end he plays this chord. Pretty awesome. And he hits that gigantic chord right before the last phrase of the melody. Let's hear it one more time. Now, this breaks pretty much every single rule of harmony, but it just sounds so cool. It's super dense. It's got a lot of notes, close, wide spacing, spanning across multiple registers. It's got a lot of color and a bunch of extensions, and he slams the piano right at the last phrase of the melody to give it that timbre. You have to resolve. So why not try chords like that in your playing? The next example I want to talk about is honestly one of my favorite examples, and it's super slick. This is from a version of Keith Jarrett playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. On the word skies, he plays the 4 chord, but on the second half of that bar, he puts the 4 chord over the guts of the 3 chord, which is the 5 chord with the 7th in the bass. For B flat, you have the G, C, and E. If you just lower the bass note from B flat to A, now you have an A minor 7. So it continues the pattern. It's super subversive, and it's slick enough to where if you weren't really listening, you would miss it. Does that make sense? Is any of this making sense? All right, well, we're on to my last example. Well, my last tune, but my last 2 examples, which is George Gershwin and Embraceable You. Lots of jazz players will play that bar leading back to the 2 chord as a turnaround. But that's not how Gershwin wrote it. I think it's important to make this distinction because it's just a really great sound. So Gershwin goes... which is descending bass motion, e.g. keeping the pattern. And then later on in the song, instead of going 2, 5, 1, he goes 2, flat 7, 1. Which is the same notes as 2, 5, well, really a minor 5, but he chooses to play it in a different inversion, which gives it a totally different feel. So what this means for you is if you know how to spell the chords and you know where they're going, you can insert a lot of different options here. And I would encourage you to try this using my pillars or create your own. And if you don't know how to harmonize melodies in a new way, I would say take that note in the melody that you're really interested in reharmonizing and then make it the root of the chord, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, sharp 4, 5, sharp 5, flat 6, 6, flat 7, 7, and see what that does. It'll take you out of the key, but you can use that because of common tones. And remember, the important part is the function. If the chords are going down and you want to keep the pattern going down, but change the chords. And feel free to make up chords. I would encourage you to do wrong things or things you think might be wrong because it will get you out of the box. If you think that this video helped you at all, please leave a like and subscribe.